Hello, everyone, and welcome to Celtic and Egyptian Spirituality. This is a webinar to introduce the upcoming 4-week course, and I hope that I will have some things of interest to you. So let me stop share so that we can all see each other. And you can, usually in the upper right-hand corner, you can click to view the entire gallery or just to view the speakers. So check that and see what you might want to as we get started today. As I said, this is an introduction to a 4-week class that will run starting next Wednesday, July the 12th through August the 2nd. And in just a few minutes, we'll start with the spirit and calling the directions. And then after we call the directions through the spirit wheel, I'll present a slideshow while I talk about this spiritual path that's weaving the Celtic and the Egyptian teachings together. So, and as we get started here, please do post in the chat your name and where you are in the world. And near the end, after I do the presentation, we will have some time for you to ask questions. But during the presentation, you can post questions or comments in the chat, and I'll try to get back to those when we get to the end. But you also will have the opportunity to, to speak your questions as well. So, and if you have comments or questions that you don't want to post, feel free to email me at any time. Let's see if I can get, let me go over to the chat and post. There we go. Nope, that is not what I meant to post. I'm trying to put my email and website in there, and something else came up that I had previously copied in there. There we go. Okay, so if you're not already on my mailing list, you can go to my website and add your name to that. And if you want to send an email directly to me, you can there my email address is in there, Peggy at motherearthsacredchores.net. So feel free to do any of those, and welcome everybody. I'm so honored that you've come today to be a part of this. And so what I'd like to do without, let me close my chat window so I won't see quite as much over there. A lot of stuff happening on my screen here. So, because I'll share my screen in a few minutes with the presentation. But right now, I want to call the directions. I've had sage and sweetgrass burning for quite a while. And so I'll do one last smudging around the space in my room, and I send this out to you to clear and bless the space that you are in today. And so I'll use my Egyptian Hathor rattle, as I often do when I call the directions. So I start, and you can sit exactly where you are, or if you are accustomed to doing the directions and know the directions in your home, you can turn and join with me as we do that. So let me see, wait, that is not what I meant to do. There we go. Okay. So as we start, I always start in the center, which is the etheric center of light and love, and I come back around to that center at the end. So starting here in the center, calling the directions, saying thank you, divine light. Thank you, divine ancestors. Thank you, guides. Thank you, divine one. for coming with us today to guide us in our path. And I turn to the east. In the east, I lift up my hands toward the rising sun, and I call in the Egyptian gods, Amun-Ra and Tefnut and Nut, and I call in the Celtic line of Anya and Lu. Guide us this day, illuminate our path, lift us, and help us to open and become aware of the energies of the ancient teachings. Illuminate us today. Thank you. And I turn to the south, the direction of laughter and music and rhythm and dance and creativity, and uprises Bast and Hathor of the Egyptian line, who call us to remember to sit in joy and to remember to dance, remember to laugh. And Bridget of the Celtic line calls us to step into our creativity, to be who we came here to and express it through whatever creative measures we use in our life. And there in the Celtic line is also the Oran Mor. The Oran Mor who brought the world into existence through the rhythm and the vibration of sound. And we say thank you. And I turn to the west, the direction of introspection. And as I reach toward the west, the black bear comes and takes my hand and takes me to her cave, where at the mouth of the cave stand the Celtic Morrigan and the Egyptian Sekhmet, warrior goddesses, protector goddesses, who stand at the mouth of the cave so that we may sit in introspection, in safety, and hear the voices of the ancestors, gather the knowledge that they have to teach us, and open our hearts and minds to understanding that knowledge, that wisdom, that teachings. And we say thank you. And we turn to the north. The north, the direction of challenge, the direction of wisdom consciousness. And Ma'at of the Egyptian line and Danu of the Celtic line rise up and impeach us, call us to take the knowledge from the West and transmute it into wisdom consciousness. And as we greet that wisdom consciousness, that we rise up as warriors of the heart to be open and aware of the teachings and the direction and the oneness. And we say thank you. And I come full circle back to the center and raise my hands to the stars, to the Milky Way, to our planets, our moon, our sun. And we say thank you for the guidance. And I reach down to Mother Earth, she who gives us life. And she reaches up and gathers us into her arms, saying, sit with me this day. Sit with me and learn. Learn the message of the ancestors. And in your own heart and mind, transmute that into wisdom consciousness. And we say thank you and say, Aho, Ashi, Amen. Blessed be, Alhamdulillah. And so it is. And so we start this beautiful journey looking at both the Celtic and the Egyptian line, and I'm so grateful that you're here today. Your very presence includes you as one who has chosen the path to be a part of this great awakening that we are in the middle of right now on this planet. So I want to present to you information from both the Celtic and the Egyptian lines, and hope that you find some information and some techniques and some ideas to incorporate into your life. And if you feel drawn to this path, I will offer a 4-week course starting in July. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But the timing of today's presentation, as well as this 4-week course, were chosen because of the auspicious events happening in July and August that bring us some astounding energetic potential. The recent full moon on July 3rd, to start with, and we are right in the middle of the Sirius Gateway, July, depending on where you live, 3rd or 4th through about 7th or 8th. And in August, Lionsgate, which again is connected to Sirius, comes on August the 8th. And later in July, the auspicious new moon on July 17th will be there to offer us some support and some resources that we may need as we are moving through this journey. And on that day, July 17th, I'll do a new moon ceremony. So I'll send that out through my email to announce that as well. And there are other things, Mercury transiting into Cancer and Venus in retrograde, and the list goes on and on. But this is a very auspicious period here through July and August. So that's why I've chosen this particular time. And back to the topic itself, there are many paths to the sacred. I offer you this glimpse of Celtic and Egyptian spirituality as one of those paths that you might choose to incorporate in your journey. Neither Celtic nor Egyptian spirituality is a formalized practice. I mean, there are no rules, no guidelines. It's a way of life similar to many indigenous practices worldwide. And the word Celtic is actually a misnomer in regard to this, because actually what I'm talking about are pre-Celtic teachings, but it's a name that we use today for ideas that come from the ancient traditions in Ireland, Scotland, England, Wales, and other places where the Celts moved into. And if you have followed my classes in spiritual work, you already know I'm deeply connected to both Ireland and Egypt, and that's very much the focus of what I'll be doing today and through the course. My journey through what I'm calling Celtic spirituality has come from several sources, from a long time ago, from reading whatever I could find, and later studying with an Irish medicine woman, and more than anything else, listening to the voice from within, or the voices of our ancestors. And that voice called me to the mounds and the stone circles and other sacred sites in Ireland and Scotland and Wales and England. And that same voice called me to Egypt. As my memories of the ancestors in the past emerged, the links between Ireland and Egypt also emerged and became more apparent, and reminded me that all paths to the sacred are interconnected. But there are actually legends that tie Ireland and the Celtic area to Egypt, and even some archaeological evidence. I'll share some of that with you as we go into the presentation today. So I want to switch over to the slideshow, but before I do that, Are there any particular questions or comments that you'd like to make before I go into the slideshow? Just unmute yourself. Let me go back to gallery view and just go ahead and unmute yourself if you'd like to have a question or a comment. Anybody? Oh, I'm seeing lots of faces I didn't see before I started. Hey, Sue Ann, and yeah, oh, welcome everybody. Oh, lots of people. This is wonderful. Thank you. Amira, yeah, Kathy, and Kathleen, yeah. Hello, everybody. This is wonderful. Well, I think what I'll do is go ahead and open the slideshow unless somebody has a comment or a question right now. Not hearing any voices, so let me share my screen with you. And let's see. So I can see Jan, Wright, and Susanna in my screen. Can you both see the full screen? Okay, good. Because part of my people down, the pictures of people down the side are covering part of my screen. I just want to make sure that you can all see it. So we're talking about Celtic and Egyptian spirituality, which is really about honoring the earth and respecting the land through honoring the spirits of the land. And this is a webinar, but I want to tell you part of where this comes from with me. When I created my business a few years ago, I blended the Celtic and the Egyptian teachings into all of that, and probably the most prominent symbol for the Celtic line is that triple spiral, and the Egyptian Eye of Horus is one of many of the symbols in Egypt. So I took those two symbols and blended them into the logo for my website. And a friend and I actually created this, drew this, and put it together. And I use this now, and I use it through my courses and through my website. And so what I want to talk to you about today is the blending of these two and calling in the spirit wheel to use as a way of life. And so I'll talk to you today about what ancient spirituality is and how the pre-Celtic and Egyptian teachings are related. And we'll talk about a little bit about fire, earth, air, and water and the four directions. And the underlying purpose of all of this is remembering who we are. So, what is Celtic and Egyptian spirituality? It's about embracing the interconnectedness of all living beings, remembering that everything, every flower, every rock, every tree, every stream is sacred. And there are some other characteristics that are in common with the two. First of all, one common characteristic in following this line is acknowledging that the divine is manifest in all living things and even through a variety of sacred sites. So you probably all know that there are stone circles all over Ireland and the Celtic land, but did you know that there's even a stone circle in Egypt? Egypt is known for its temples and its pyramids, but even stone circles. And this one was supposed to have built about 7,000 years ago. So we have a lot in common there across the two. And other characteristics are that spiritual traditions of the ancients still have something to teach us today. So we consciously or unconsciously weave our lives with cycles. Sometimes we follow the the thread, the thread that's there for us. And sometimes we weave these threads, and sometimes we even hear and follow our inner voice. We're responsible for making our choices and finding ways to open ourselves to the inner voice. There are guides. There are guides all around us waiting for us to say, I need some help. Show me the way. Guide me. They're there. They're our ancient ancestors ready to help us. And so one of the tools that I use that you may find helpful is walking the spirit wheel. It's in some traditions called the medicine wheel. In the Celtic line, it's often called a spirit wheel. And what I want to talk about is awakening and living life through the spirit wheel. Not just calling the directions, but really and truly living life from moment to moment, day to day, year to year, lifetime to lifetime, through the journey of the medicine wheel. And so I place, because I follow a Celtic tradition, I place the air, fire, water, and earth in the east, southwest, and north. There are other traditions that put those elements in different places, but for what I'm talking about, these will be the references of those. So the east is about illumination, and the south is about joy and creativity, and the west is about introspection, and the north is about wisdom, consciousness. So there are many, many aspects to look at and to work through and to live through as we work with the spirit wheel. And then the divine center is the center of love, the center of nature, the center of oneness. And that's the place where we are today. We're starting in the center with the spirit wheel. And as you notice, you may have noticed when I call the directions, I tend to call the same ones, though sometimes I change around. But Ra, or Amun Ra, and Tefnut and Nut are of the Egyptian line, and all of them are about the sun. And Lu and Anya are a sun god and sun goddess of the Celtic line. Then in the south, the direction of rhythm and love and laughter and creativity is Bast and Hathor, and then Bridget, Yor, and more. In the west, the Egyptian Sekhmet and the Celtic Morrigan take us into introspection. And in the north, Ma'at, the Egyptian goddess of balance, of justice, stands in the north, calling us to awaken. And beside her is Danu of the Celtic line, saying, step forward, become the warrior of the heart, be all that you came here to be. Open your heart, live and love. Love with the center. And in the center, from the Egyptian line, we would call Isis and Osiris, and from the Celtic line, the Cailleach. And so I'll talk more about them as we go through, especially during the course time, but this is all a part of that movement through the wheel, and then finding ways to manifest your spiritual connection with that wheel through other things like sacred ceremonies and sacred sites, through poetry and songs and art and dance and sacred symbols and prayers. Sacred celebrations happened all over the Celtic world and all over the Egyptian land in the ancient past and still today. There are many, 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 many ceremonies. The dominant ones are around the solstices and the equinoxes, and both cultures absolutely acknowledge and celebrate both of those. Then the Celtic line does the cross quarter, which you may be familiar with. Imbolc and Beltane and Lunasa and Samhain are the cross quarter, and those are related to different times of planting and harvesting through the year. And so the Egyptian celebrations were connected also to that harvesting and planting, and directly connected to the inundation of the Nile coming in, the flooding through June to September, and then their season of planting and their season of harvesting and coming full circle round and round. The ancients knew that earth holds memory. And so they held their celebrations on the land, but they did much more than just walk the land. They moved the land. They lived in harmony with nature and created phenomenal monuments by moving soil and rock, by moving the earth and planting ancient memory in those. They created gateways to the other world. And the pyramids also retain the ancient memory. The priests and the priestesses imbued that memory into the very stone that built the pyramids. And they were aligned with Orion, the constellation, and with the star Sirius. The memory of all this is there, but we may have to awaken some of that memory. The Druids also planted memory in the stones. This is a stone around the huge, enormous Newgrange in Ireland, and this one was built around 5,000 years ago. This is one of the curbstones with these carvings that they did into the curbstone. Well, surprise, surprise, the pyramids aligned Orion and Sirius. This stone is said to represent Orion's belt with the three holes, and Sirius over here, because that's more or less where Sirius is in the sky, related to Orion's belt. This particular stone is maybe 6 to 8 feet across and 4 feet wide. This is someone's coat. When I took this picture, there was someone standing there with a jacket, if that gives you any idea. But the mound itself is huge. It's about 260 feet in diameter. And it has this base of curbstones, 97 curbstones. This is one of them. So you see there's the connection to the stars that are connected between the two as well. And right now, in our Milky Way, from July 4th to July 8th, the sun, our sun, and Sirius are lined up. They're unlocking a powerful vortex of energy right now. And we call the cultures across time have called Sirius our spiritual sun. It's much, much larger than our sun and emits much, much, much more energy. And so when our sun and Sirius are aligned, there is a portal, and ancient cultures have acknowledged this and recognized this portal through time. We call it the Sirius Gateway, and it helps to activate and to shift us to higher levels of spiritual awareness. This gateway can open us to messages from divine guides, to our intuition, to our creativity. Now, some of us slip into those pretty easily, but even those of us that do that sometimes have trouble. So this is a gateway that really helps open that energy, open that and help us to be more aware of that intuition, more aware of the guides, more aware of our creativity. So this is a photograph of Sirius A that was taken by the Hubble Space Telescope. And this little tiny dot is actually called Sirius B. It too is a star, but in the photograph you can see them both. So what I'd like you to do is just sit quietly for just a very few minutes and let this opening of the Sirius Gateway that's happening right now, let this come into your being, come into your heart, come into your mind. And so you can sit and just look at the screen and stare at the image here of Sirius, or close your eyes. But either way, just sit and let those messages from the otherness come through. Let those spirit guides send you messages as I chant for just a couple of minutes. So if you heard any messages or felt any particular emotions or movement, just take a moment to jot down anything that might have come to you. Just, not to try to write an experience, but just jot a few little words or phrases that might be beneficial to you. So Sirius is not quite through with us yet, even though we have a few more days. We have through July the 8th or so with this Earth in Sirius alignment. But in August, we have another portal opening called Lionsgate, August the 8th. And that occurs when Sirius, the Earth, and the Orion constellation are all three in alignment. And that is another huge opening that occurs with this giant influx of energy coming through for us. And just, watch for I do moon ceremonies with the Celtic days, and on August the 1st, there will be a new moon, and I'll do a new moon ceremony that will include Lionsgate as well as the Celtic Lunacy celebrations. So I'll put that in an email when I get closer to that time to do that. So the ancient Celtic and Egyptian teachings are very important for us today, because we are in this transition, moving into a new period, a new age, a new awakening. So the problem is that over time, our natural need for that wholeness and balance with the earth has been forgotten. We've tossed it aside with all of our attention to our earthly earthliness, and everything around us, technology, engineering, even Western religions, tell us that we're masters of the earth. I think that the climate change is beginning to help us remember that we're not masters. We may be damaging it, but not mastering it very well. And our spiritual life, organized religion, has even separated us from nature and from the oneness, putting mediators in to separate us out. So we don't have that direct connection to the sacred and the divine. But this is a time for remembering, a time for waking up, a time for reaching back to the ancient teachings to remember who we are. So the ancient Egyptians came around probably 36,000 years ago. And I know you're going to say, oh, but the pyramids were built, 5,000 years ago or this or that. And maybe they were. The Sphinx is significantly older than the pyramids. But the ancient Egyptian civilization is much, much older than that. And that interconnectedness to all living beings calls us to remember that, to honor fire, earth, air, and water, all of the elements, all of the earth. So I say 36,000 years, did I just pluck that out of the air? Well, not exactly. There's actually some evidence, maybe not scientifically provable evidence, but there is some evidence. So around 400 BCE, so we're talking 2,400 years ago, we had some, we have written information from that timeline for sure, written in, Greek and Latin and other languages that, even in books that we still have from that timeline. And so what we learned in, what was taught in 400 BCE is Herodotus wrote that the Egyptian priest informed him that the sun had twice set where it now rose and twice risen where it now set. And what that means is the ancient Egyptians and most of the indigenous cultures in the ancient cultures were very aware of the zodiac cycle of about 26,000 years. And so looking at that 26,000 year cycle, the ancient Egyptian history extends through one complete zodiac cycle plus a partial zodiac cycle, starting in the year 10,948 or thereabout BCE, the beginning point of our present zodiac cycle. I'll show you more about that in a few minutes. Right up to 30 BCE when Cleopatra died, and at that point the ancient Egyptian hierarchy really lost its independence. So that's where the 36,000 years comes from. These numbers are rough, they're not exact, but, and this information came from a friend of mine who operates an Egyptian mystery school called the Tahuti Research Foundation. And this is in some of his writings, and it's from writings from the hieroglyphs on the walls in the temples. So that's kind of the origin of the Egyptian line. Let's look at the origin of the Celtic line. Now, the Celts, like their philosophy and their magic, there's lots of mystery behind that. But we're talking about stories before the Celts came. So long ago, somewhere in the Neolithic period, about 10 to 12,000 years ago, there was movement from the Ukrainian steppe, from Persia, from Turkey, from Egypt. There was movement around. Now a lot of history that we got in school, didn't acknowledge so much movement, but we're finding more and more today that there truly was a lot of movement during this timeline. And in the Bronze Age, the Celts actually moved across this area, migrated about 4,000 years ago. But long before the Celts migrated, there was evidence of farming in Ireland, in Scotland. There were people already living there 10,000, 12,000 years ago. And there's archaeological evidence to back that up. I won't go into all that detail, but it really is there. And textbooks said farming originated in Turkey, Persia, in this area about 7,500 years ago, but there's evidence that there's farming even further back than that. Then there's the more recent story in this 4,000-year timeline with a migration from Egypt to Ireland, though there probably was some movement long before that timeline. But so what we're talking about is this time of the sacred feminine 5,000, 7,000 years ago. This was a time of the great mother goddess, a time of peace. And through this timeline, 7,000 years ago, there was very little warfare, very little. And the evidence of that is that the villages had no defensive perimeters. So, and there's no evidence of masses of weapons certainly for hunting, and farming, but not weapons for warfare. So, and it was not a period of matriarchy over patriarchy, but a period of cooperation between men and women, a time when we still remembered who we were. But eventually, this transitioned into patriarchy. And so by 4000 BCE, humans had moved into farming, which led to cities and settled life. And the peacefulness of this previous age came to an end as the Iron Age started around 2000 BCE. And this is the timeline where we find weapons and warfare and military cultures. People moved toward villages with protective forts, and matriarchy was replaced by patriarchy. So we're talking about a timeline here, and we could spend days and days talking about but this was this particular zodiac calendar was introduced by the Theosophical Society in 1875, though it's a concept that the ancients across time have always known, where we go in this 26,000-ish year cycle in a period of cosmic day and cosmic night. So we're about 13,000 years in one and 13,000 years in the other. And so all that we know about really goes into the cosmic night timeline. Right down here at the bottom of the screen, this is the Neolithic period from 8600 to 10,800 BCE. And from there, we move forward through the calendar to Cancer, where there was evidence of farming in Ireland, through the age of Gemini, the age of Taurus, the age of Aries, where the divine feminine was really totally replaced by the patriarchy. Celts moved into Europe. The end of the ancient Egyptian empire ended, and we moved into Pisces, this last 2,000 years of our timeline. Now, when we move into the next stage, which is Aquarius, is not exact, but they estimate it somewhere in the early 2000s, maybe as late as 2100. And it will go for about 2,000 years. Each of these cycles go about 2,000, a little over 2,000 years. So we are in the cusp. We are right in the timeline between the two ages. And that's part of why our world is so upside down today. We're in the chaos of the cusp between ages. And that's why I want to present this information to you so that we can look more closely at how to live through and how to work through this changing from one age to another. As we move into Aquarius, we're in about a 200-year cusp. So even if it's supposed to start in 2100, we're in the middle of this transition. And we're still aware of the duality that's there in Pisces, still with us, but we're being given the opportunity now to grow and to evolve and to remember who we are. The opportunity to step into our spiritual path and begin to unwind the greed, the deceitfulness, the division that we have clung to so tightly with our humanity. The ancient Egyptians and the pre-Celtic teachings can help guide us through this transition. So in Pisces, where we've been for the last 2,000 years, it was a time where we had some avatars that really brought some beautiful teachings in, Jesus and Buddha and others. The problem was that we as a people gave our power over to the lords and the priests and the kings. And the age of Aquarius, the energy, the vibration of Aquarius is the water bearer, meaning that we carry our own power, that we carry the power of truth and love. We carry the ability not to give our power over to the priests and the kings, but to be our own carriers of the truth. The age of Aquarius is future oriented with not much regard for tradition. I think we're in that space right now. Tradition's being turned upside down in many directions. But it's also a focus on community, not the individual, but the community, and not by following the crowd, but true commitment to the community. And another sign of Aquarius is revolution. Revolution in communication, in technology, in inventions, interactions, even in gender fluidity. So we're talking about the resurrection of ancient wisdom to help us move through this timeline. Those of you who are watching the recording and those of you who are alive here today, we're drawn to this and other workshops and classes because we came here by choice, whether we know it or not. We were called here. We were called here to be alive in this transition, to be alive in the middle of this insane chaos that the world is in. Because we're called here to embody the light. We're called here because we are capable of facing the shadow side and bringing the illumination into our future generations. When we can harmonize our ego with our soul memory, we can really step into Aquarius's highest values: humanitarianism, reason and knowledge, innovation, and we can work together for a greater goal. Just like birds migrate from one season to another, it's time for us to migrate into Aquarius, to remember who we are and let the ancient ancestors guide our path. The pre-Celts were often called the Tuhadei, and so the Tuhadei and the Egyptians saw us all as one, connected to one another. And they probably saw the world differently from how we view it today. They they believed, they taught that the spiritual was commingled with the physical, and they saw us floating through the veil between the worlds. Mystical literature from all cultures sees visions of the spirit behind and within nature. So, in addition to people being interconnected, ancient spirituality tells us that the natural landscape is spiritually alive with the spirit of nature. So, Mother Earth connects and grounds us. She's there looking out from the tree. She's under our feet. She's the roots of our trees. She's part of our grounding. She calls us. She calls us to remember who we are, to become the cauldron, to become the vessel, to hold the energy from the divine light and let it flow through us and into the earth. And above us are the stars, because, we're made of stardust. We are made of the same atoms and molecules and minerals as the stars. Our planet, everything on the planet, all of the trees and rocks and minerals, and our bodies are all made up of the same thing, connected to the stars. And the Egyptians and the pre-Celtic connections were very clear. This is Pulnabron on I guess it's on the left, unless your screen has reverted it, but this one where my mouse is floating around. This is a stone circle. It's about 15 feet, I'm sorry, not a stone circle, but a standing stone about 15 feet high, with the Milky Way above it. And this is the Milky Way over Egypt. Both cultures refer to their rivers mirroring the Milky Way. The River Boyne in Ireland and the Nile River in Egypt are both said to be mirrors of the Milky Way. They both have goddesses that are identified with the river and the Milky Way. The Boyne is the goddess of the Boyne River, spelled slightly differently, and then Hathor in Egypt. And both of them are called cow goddesses. Now, the cow goddess means life-giving. And the explanation is their abundant life-giving milk forms the stars in the Milky Way and the celestial waterway. Both goddesses represent the physical world and give spiritual nourishment. In Ireland, that Boyne River is regarded as the embodiment of the goddess Boann. And in Egypt, Satet is the guardian of the source of the Nile. There are several water goddesses and Nile gods and goddesses in Egypt with different purposes, but she is the guardian of the source of the Nile. And the goddesses of that flowing water bring spiritual insight and inspire creativity. So, because they help us clean up the debris that's in our mind and let us open to that source. At Tara, which is a mystical center in Ireland and the seat of the High Kings, at Tara, many royal people were buried in what's called a mound of hostages, and that name comes from it being a location where the different tribes would exchange hostages when their wars were over. But this was built about 5,000 years ago. And the reason I'm talking about it is that there was a very interesting discovery. The discovery was in the early 60s, but we didn't have DNA testing back then. So what they found in the mound of hostages was the skeleton of a young man who was wearing a necklace made of faciant beads. Now, faciant beads are made in Egypt. They look like these. Sometimes they're scarabs, sometimes they're just beads with markings and carvings on them. So carbon dating showed that the remains were roughly 3,800 years old. And they discovered that the carvings on the necklace matched designs that would have come from Egypt. And so the archaeologist made the assumption that there must have been trading between Ireland and Egypt until the DNA testing came along in more recent years and new ideas evolved. This was not just some body of some young man wearing beads from Egypt. He was actually Egyptian. This was an Egyptian man buried in the royal burial grounds in Ireland. At least 4,000 years ago. So we know that we have connections across time. Also found at Tara was the skeleton of a Barbary ape. And another excavation site, they found the skull of a Barbary ape. That's a little strange, given that there's no such animal that's native to Ireland. So why would we have skeletons of a Barbary ape in the mound of hostages and in other archaeological sites that they have found? Well, the ape was a symbol for the Egyptian god Tot, or sometimes pronounced Thoth, and in the Egyptian language it's called Tahuti. Also, Ramses II used the ape as one of his symbols and had many of these carved above different statues in the temples. So again, there's another connection from thousands of years back between Egypt and Ireland. But even further back than 4000 BCE, there seem to be some other connections. The gods and goddesses of Ireland are called the Tuatha Dé Danann, and there is speculation that they actually came from Egypt. The phonetic comparisons within the Egyptian hieroglyphs translate to these words, and those translate to things like Toth's crossing, Toth's journey by boat, Toth's storm. Now, Tahuti, is often predicted as with an ibis head, as the bird, a bird head, but he's very closely associated with the baboon as well. And the story that was written on the temple walls in hieroglyphs is called Toth's Crossing. It tells the story in Egypt that matches the story that's told in Ireland of the coming of the Tuatha Dé. So the story is that they came to Ireland as people of light to do no harm, but they knew that they had to battle dark forces that had moved into this sacred land of Ireland. So the question became, were the Tuatha Dé gods, or were they humans trained with special powers? They're also called the Sidhe, S-I-D-H-E, pronounced the Sidhe. And the question, after finding the archaeological evidence, the question became, were the Tuatha Dé trained in Egypt? Were they people with supernatural powers? The legend says that the Tuatha Dé came from lands under the wave to care for the land and the people of Era. And the Egyptian hieroglyphs tell us the story of Toth's Crossing. The Tuatha Dé are considered by many to be the original gods and goddesses. They're known by many names. The Shining Ones is one of the most common names. People of light, people of the mounds, the Sidhe, the good people. And they had earth and weather magic, shifting wind patterns, disappearing behind as they stood in front of a tree and things like that. So the story goes that they came to Ireland in these boats, and for 3 days they were out on the coast of Ireland in smoke and mist and storm that darkened the sun and filled the land with clouds and smoke and fog. The beings, the people who were already on Ireland, thought that these people had arrived in some magical mist. That's the storyline that comes down. And they were said to be beautiful, handsome beings. They came in the boat, they came to Ireland, they landed, and they planted the seeds of the Irish spiritual heritage that would echo through time all the way up to today. They were said to have influenced and even manipulated energy fields, and they were called the Shining Ones because their very bodies emanated a glow. It's the same story that comes from the legends in Ireland and the hieroglyphs in Egypt. So the Tuhadei, often called the She, call us to the divine light, to listen to the divine light within us, to recognize our place in the great cosmic web. And they taught 3 important things that are foundations of both Celtic and Egyptian spirituality. Honor the gods, do no evil, and live courageously. Now, I would kind of translate those into slightly different words. Honor the divine light. Do no evil, do good and care about the people around you. But I wouldn't change the word live courageously. It takes a strong, beautiful heart to stand up and live courageously. So these are the foundations of Egyptian and Celtic spirituality. They call us to attend our sacred relationship with the earth and all of life. We seem to have forgotten our connection with earth and water, and believe, most of humans in the Western world anyway, believe that we are masters of the earth and that all of this was created for us to use. But there's a different story from the Celtic and the Egyptian line. Like the weaving of the Celtic knot, the Celtic druids and the Egyptian priests and priestesses wove their spiritual beliefs into their daily lives. They honored and held sacred Mother Earth and all her beings, the birds, the animals, the rocks, the earth, the trees. This is actually my land. This is my porch that you see in the background. And those are animals bird and bear, that I took a picture of here on my land. And if we can remember that we are a part of all that sacredness, then we protect the land and we protect the animals and the beings. And the trees, the amazing, amazing trees. This is a picture in Ireland at Newgrange, and this is my friend Kathy, who's actually on the call today, looking up at this gigantic oak. The Druids, the ancient oak tree was the sacred tree for the Druids, and their acorn represents the highest form of fertility, the creativity of the mind. The Egyptians regarded the sycamore tree as their tree of life and the meditation tree. We are the dust, the earth, the air, the water, the fire. Everything is layered on top of everything else and coexists all at the same time. We forget that it all coexists at once. We're on a planet that's in transition from one age to another. And we're here to help uplift the consciousness, to help raise the consciousness of the beings already here, to open the doorway for the new beings coming into life, coming into existence. Will we open our hearts and minds to the ancient teachings and help us remember? Intellect rules on the earth, but really it's the space between, and we have to see beyond the veil to know that the other world exists. So that's the end of my presentation, and I do want to open up in just a few minutes for questions and discussion. But what I want to do first, since we've come together in this circle, I want to close the circle before we get into discussion and forget to do this, and then I always do it afterwards, but sometimes I forget it while I'm in the middle of talking and discussion. So what I want to do is, again, starting in the center, saying thank you, divine light, thank you. And I go to the north and say thank you for guiding us here. I go to the west and say thank you for leading us into introspection. To the south, thank you for the joy and the laughter, and to the north, the illumination. We thank you for coming. We thank you for guiding us. We thank you for helping us. Aho, Ashi, Amen. Blessed be, Hamdulillah. And so it is. So I want questions from you, but let me just very briefly tell you what's coming up. If you're interested in the course, you can go to my website and register or find out more information, or send me an email if you want more information. But we're going to do this journey through the Celtic and Egyptian spirit wheel by week 1 talking about illumination and awakening, and week 2 about creativity and lifting inertia and stepping into joy. And week 3, what is introspection? What is remembering who we are? How do we hear the voices of the ancestors? And week 4 is about transforming all that knowledge into wisdom consciousness so that we can truly remember who we are. So let me stop share and come back to, let's see, let me take myself off the pen and go to gallery view. There we go. And so questions, comments, discussion. I'll go to the let me go to the chat and see if any questions are over there. Lots of folks, if you did not earlier post your name, your location where you are, please do that so I can look back later and see who showed up. Sue Ann posted about the Mayan concept. Mayan is one of the indigenous people of the earth who absolutely followed that cycle. Slightly different from what I described with the 12 divisions, but it's the very similar concept with that. So let me open the floor, and if you had a question in the chat that I didn't see, because I don't know that I got through everything, by all means say that and open your mic and go ahead and speak if you'd like to talk. Yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
I have a question about the Mayan calendar. I have some memory when I was younger that at a certain point it ended.
Nope.
No. Oh, where did I
No.
get that?
That
You
was,
got it from the misinformation that was sent out by many media outlets. What ended was an era, and it ended on December 21st, 2012, which began a new era of about 5,200 years, an era that the Mayans looked forward to and even carved into stone stelae as an important date in the future. So, as Peggy was speaking about the age of Aquarius, not only are we on the cusp of this Aquarian age, we are on the cusp of this new 5,200 year period to be characterized by a balance of male and female energy.
yeah.
So thank you for bringing that up, because this is a big misunderstanding
Yeah.
of many people.
Well,
It
thank you
really,
for clearing that up.
yeah,
Sure.
the timelines really very closely overlay.
Mhm.
You
Right.
know, my teaching from, oh my goodness, from the 1970s was about the cosmic day and cosmic night, and with Aquarius in there, but the Mayan calendar is right there, and it's very possible that the age of Aquarius actually started December 31st, 2012. I mean, that's highly possible. We
Mhm.
don't know. Nobody knows exactly the date of the changing in terms of Aquarius and things, but
Right.
certainly it's the new awakening into the new age is certainly with the cosmic day and cosmic night, kind of.
Yeah, and that recognition of the 26,000 year period, which is, when you realize that the ancients, I mean, we only have evidence that some of the ancients recognize this. Well, they probably all did,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, absolutely, yeah, yeah. So, what other questions or comments, Valerie?
Yes. What year was it that they discovered that that skeleton was an Egyptian?
I don't remember the exact date. It's after they started DNA testing, so it was in the 2000s. But I
Oh,
don't.
so it's very recent.
Yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. Because DNA testing came available at some point, and they didn't move it into archaeology immediately. But yeah, this
And,
is. So it
and what
was.
about that necklace? When did they discover the necklace?
Well, the necklace was on the body, on the skeleton of this man, a young
Right.
man. And so this young man was wearing this necklace of fascient beads, and they identified those beads as being Egyptian, but assumed that it had to do with trade across,
Yeah.
not assuming that Egyptians were in Ireland.
Actually, there.
But
Yeah.
this proved that
Amazing.
they were.
Just
And there
amazing.
are others, there are other stories about the Egyptians coming at other timelines into Ireland as well.
So interesting.
Mhm.
Yeah. What other questions or comments?
Peggy, I found it interesting when you were speaking about the she and the different names that they were called.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help wondering, because I know the Egyptians were very connected to the star beings from other planets.
Yeah.
If those beings of light that the Celts were referring to may also have been light beings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's much legend about that. Of course, we don't have any pre-Celtic writings at all. We have some stones in Ireland and Scotland and England that were carved, but those are not much more than 2,000 years ago. They're pushing it 2,500 years ago to have some carvings, whereas the hieroglyphs are much older than that. And yeah, it's yeah, lots of stories back there, word of mouth stories that have come down through time. And many, especially in the Celtic world, many of those legends that were passed down, when we got to current era, 2000, in the last 2000 years after Christianity came into being, many of those stories were recorded by the monks, written down by the monks. Now, I can go on for days and tell you stories that were most likely changed to fall into Christianity as opposed to pagan practices. But I won't spend time telling those stories, but there are plenty. So we do know some of the stories from the ancient times because those word of mouth stories at one point were written, albeit by Catholic monks, but part of the story is there. Yeah.
Is Newgrange pre-Celtic or Celtic?
Oh, pre-Celtic.
Okay.
Yeah. It's at least at the very least 3,500 years ago. It's probably more like 5,000 years ago. There are other sites in Ireland that go into 7,000 years old. So there, it goes pretty far back. The Celts did not come in until about 4,000 years ago.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Who else? Any other questions, comments? Lisa? Yeah.
I have another question. I have two questions, actually. The Druids, are they pre-Celtics or or different completely?
Both. They're in Egypt, they called them priests and priestesses. In the Celtic line, they called them druids.
Oh,
Yeah. So they were with the pre as well as the Celts. Yeah.
okay. And my other question is, I watched a talk about Egypt, and it mentioned that the pyramids are built on top of other pyramids.
Well, you see, there's something like 30 pyramids still partially standing in Egypt.
Mm-hmm.
and some of the older ones were built on top of other ones, and some were not.
Okay.
We think of the pyramids, we think of those three giant ones in Cairo, and actually there are 5 still standing there, and there are 2 others where there are ruins that are all right there in the same area. But there are pyramids 30 miles south of there is a whole nother Saqqara is a whole nother area where many of the pyramids were. So there are many pyramids in Egypt, not just those 5 that we usually talk about.
Do those 5, are they on top of other pyramids?
I don't think so. I don't think they were built on top of other pyramids. I think it's I forget if it's I forget the names of the other ones, but I think it's in Saqqara where they are built on top of other ones.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Have you heard about this new documentary called The Lost Pyramid?
I have, but I haven't watched it. I haven't
Either. I just wondered. Yeah.
Yeah. What you have to remember with any of the information, basically, that you get, especially from Egypt, the Egyptologist would find things and decide this is how it happened. And the same thing happened in the Celtic lands. The archaeologist will hold on to something even when they've been proven wrong. And so you really have to listen to it all with a grain of salt and listen in your heart to figure out and find out what really rings true. And because there are lots of them out there telling lots of different stories and different things. And Some of it is true, and some of it is old information that hasn't been readjusted. So yeah. But good questions. Yeah. What else? Anybody else? Silence across the way. Valerie, yeah.
How did they suspect the Egyptians got there? Would they have come by boat up the Mediterranean or by land?
Well, depends again, depends on who you talk to about it, but we know that more recently, like 4,000 years ago, they actually came by boat
Mhm.
across the Mediterranean Sea, around Iberia, which is Spain and Portugal, and up the coast. We know, I mean, there's evidence of that, archaeological evidence of that. I have a friend who's a channeler who says that they also teleported from Egypt into, I mean, he specifically talks about a place in Scotland that was a portal. So,
Like
you,
Outlander.
well, yeah, yeah, like Outlander, a portal through there. Yeah. But he, I mean, he's absolutely positive that, that was the case. So, yeah, but we know more in more recent history, 4,000 years ago, that they came by boat. Yeah. Yeah. Any other questions? Well, as you can imagine, I could talk all day on this stuff. I love it. And I hope that you are interested enough to take the course that will start next Wednesday. And I will, just like this session is recorded today, and I will post it on my website and on my YouTube channel. The classes will be recorded. Now, they will not be openly available. You have to register for the course. But if you register for the course and can't make one of the classes, then you can watch the replay. And I'm always available for emails when you have questions, because you missed the class and you've watched it and now you've got questions. I'm very open to working with people with that too. So I want to thank you. Thank you for coming, and thank you for being here and being a part of all of this. Thank you.